celebrities are a character or putting on a show or those types of things. I mean, there's plenty of instances where the personality of what is known about someone, and this is really big in the YouTube influencer community and things like that, where it's the show or the character that someone's putting on isn't necessarily who they really are in the day-to-day, and you hear all these stories on that.
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hey everyone, Kelly McGuire with Vujade Digital. Excited to get into today's topic.
Hey, it's Todd, Kelly's partner. It's Monday, November 3rd. Halloween is over and I'm still eating candy, which is not good for me. And here we go. Race to the end of the year and the holidays. And I saw a ton of Christmas commercials this weekend, which my wife and I were screaming at the TV to go away. We're not ready yet.
No, November. It's allowed starting November.
No, it's not December yet. We should have Christmas commercials in December, not November. So today, interesting topic that's starting to trend and emerge across all the wires. And I think the headline for me is AI ate my brand ambassador. Not my homework, ate my brand ambassador. In other words, we are going to talk about virtual influencers and their impact so far to date on the industry and at what cost or cause. Is it worth it? And so on and so forth. So we're talking about virtual influencers. Is it innovation? Is it illusion? Are we attempting to replace humans with pixels? And can we safely say AI ate my brand ambassador? So here's what I want to debate. I've got some themes prompted and ready to go for virtual influencers or virtual creators, whatever terminology we want to use, and against, which I will get your opinion on. And so our core sort of topic is, are virtual creators, virtual influencers of the likes, is this like the future of advertising? Is this something that we as an advertising agency are going to have to start to figure out how to embrace? Or is it maybe one of those sort of shortcuts that is not going to last because people are going to revolt against virtual creators or influencers versus real humans? Because I've actually saw something over the weekend that said scrolling, people are reducing their scroll time because they're just getting tired of it. And I was like, wow, that's the first time I've seen that statistic. So I thought that was interesting. So virtual influencers, Kelly, my first talking point around virtual influencers in favor of is efficiency and cost. It can be much cheaper than paying real talent. What do you think about that?
I mean, the way I think of it is it's just a messaging vehicle. It's another version of different mediums in which to tell a story, and how you use those mediums determines how effective, useful, or believable it really is. So I don't see anything inherently wrong with it. I don't. It's funny because one of the things that I think about is if you think about the concept of an influencer, one of the biggest versions of that has historically been celebrities to some degree. And oftentimes celebrities are a character or putting on a show or those types of things. I mean, there's plenty of instances where the personality of what is known about someone, and this is really big in the YouTube influencer community and things like that, where it's the show or the character that someone's putting on isn't necessarily who they really are in the day-to-day. And you hear all these stories on that. And I think about that when I think about the authenticity of an AI creator. Is it a character? Is it any different in that way? I know we're talking about the difference between virtual and human, and that takes it a step further. But again, I think it's an iteration or a variation of other challenges and similarities that have always historically existed in other ways. So that brings me back around to, if it can fit a brand, if you can tell a story through it, if you can connect, if you can be creative about it, and people ultimately vote with their dollars and their eyeballs and their time and all of that. I think it's absolutely worth exploring and kind of going through and figuring out. But I don't necessarily see it as the end all be all. And I think it's got a long ways to go before it would do a full replacement. But I think I think there's a novelty to it. I have no idea where it'll evolve. It also makes me think of the story that you heard about I'm going back to celebrity. There was this big uproar about a virtual actress who was supposed to get signed by a talent agent. And then like the whole SAG revolted and there's this whole idea. And so I don't know, it creates this whirlwind of, excitement and cool and novelty. And where's this going to go? It creates the fear mongering of like, what is it going to do? And how does this cost the humanity element of it? And it's just a continuation of that same AI conversation. So that's a big way of me saying, I don't really know. I think it's worth exploring. I think it's a creative medium that could be really cool. And yeah, it carries a lot of efficiency and opportunity that could be interesting to see what someone could do with it.
Well, yeah, the big topic is around sort of the soul and culture of humans and creativity. And does a virtual influencer sort of undermine that and just basically democratize this idea, and it begins to replace humans with, pixels, if you will. But the original question for this was, let's say normally you're used to paying a fairly high-end influencer $50 grand. You could create a virtual one for $1,000 and have it do whatever you want it to do. Does that matter? Do you think that being able to just recreate something that is supposed to do the same thing as the human did for, 1/10 the cost, do you think just that in alone is going to create some sort of system where companies are just going to mass produce these things, and then it democratizes this whole idea of like, an influencer is supposed to be an influencer because they authentically represent a brand or product that they buy into and believe and want to promote because they're the testimonial, right? And that they're the ones saying, hey, I don't know, I'll use something extreme. I'm a rock climber and I use this rope because technically this rope is never broken and nobody's ever died. Like, are you going to trust a rock climber telling you that, like a real human influencer, or are you going to trust a fake one telling you that just for the sake of the cost? Let's stick to the cost argument right now. Does the minuscule cost of creating virtual influencers versus the cost of real human talent, do you think that's going to democratize and just create an overwhelming overflow of this stuff?
I don't think you can decouple the cost with the practicality and the reality of what it is, though, because, even in what you just said, you sort of skip past the whole idea. Like, we're not at Skynet, right? It's not machines making machines, right? There are people behind these virtual AI influencers. There's training being done. There's information, and it's a reflection of what it's consuming, what it's adapting to, what it is figuring out, how to deliver information in a way that fits its guidelines and narratives to make that connection, right? So I don't know. You get into a very existential thinking when you come into that, like your rock climber example, right? The person that you're following, I mean, it's still their opinion. It's still a formulation of their experience and then their own biases and their own things. Like, they're not the end all be all that everything they say is, gospel. I mean, there's lots of instances where you spend a lot of money on an influencer, or brands will use an influencer and they don't know anything about the brand. They maybe never use it. They're just getting paid to talk about it. That's not the ideal situation, but that happens all of the time. And so how is that all that much different when you talk about the credibility and the authenticity of it? The whole point of it is just creating that connection. And at the end of the day, the whole point of why someone is an influencer is because they have cultivated entertaining enough content that someone's willing to tune in and spend the time it takes to absorb what it is they're delivering. If the AI creator has gotten good enough to get someone to stop scrolling and to pay attention and to work into the algorithm that says, I am interested in this versus the next thing that I can scroll to, then that is still tapping into the same thing of value, which is you're delivering your message through someone who's capturing attention, who is conveying something enough of value to get that time in front of them. And so that's where it gets really weird. Are you simply buying attention and time? Are you buying someone's opinion and experience and expertise? Like, all of these things, I think, have to be factored when you decide that. If at the end of the day, you're just talking about getting a message in time, like airtime on TV, right? The digital version of that, then yeah, spending $1,000 for someone to spend 10 or 20 seconds getting exposed to your brand story is way better than 50,000 of the same thing. But that may, just the time and attention factor may not be it. It may be the credibility factor, the endorsement factor, the recommendation factor, the association with this person who I like their look and feel and their style is saying this is cool, and therefore I'm going to buy it because it's cool. Like that's going back to, we've had this conversation before, the value of brand. And so I don't know, I'm bringing this all around. I'm not giving you an answer, but is it commercial time? Is it endorsement time? Is it belief to buy? Is it just awareness that it exists? These are all considerations you have to go in on how much you should spend and where you should spend it.
Yeah. And so I'm going to reframe the story again and ask you in a different way with a similar example. But the arguments in favor of this whole idea of virtual creators, virtual influencers is it's efficient, it's cost effective. You have absolute production control and freedom, right? Like you don't have to worry about an influencer or a celebrity not showing up or showing up late or weather causing a problem. You don't have to worry about, scandals that the influencer gets involved in and impacting your brand. You have total creative control, right? In that situation. So those are all the arguments in favor. We'll get into the arguments against. Let me reframe the story. So I'm going to, for some reason, I don't know why I'm thinking of rock climbing, but I'm thinking of rock climbing. So let's go with this storyline. How would you feel? Because I could see this happening right now today. I'm a rock climber and I'm scrolling my Instagram feed and I come across this video of this guy climbing some pitch or something that, maybe I know because I'm a rock climber. I'm like, oh my God, he's Half Dome or whatever it is. Like, look at this great pitch that this climber is climbing. And then I'm like, oh, that's cool. This guy's name is Alex Smith. I'm going to start following him. And I start following him and, I keep seeing posts from Alex climbing these amazing routes. And then this climber starts doing gear reviews and starts talking about gear and starts talking about, the harnesses and the ropes and all this stuff and the packs or whatever. And he's talking about this rope and saying all these great things about this rope. And then I find out that climber's not real. That climber's fake. Does that, in your mind, if you were a rock climber, replace this with whatever you're into, and you find that out, do you care? Does it matter? Does authenticity and credibility and truth just go flying out the window and you just go, oh my God, I got completely duped. I would never trust this brand who created this fake influencer to promote these products that we make, because now I know they're just trying to sell me shit. I actually don't know if a human's ever really used this product in the wild and whether or not it works.
I'm going to use a different example of a very similar experience to answer the question. It depends on if they are actively trying to deceive me, if they are passing it off as real in there. And I liken it to, if you've ever seen these commercials, I don't know if you remember these, but there was a soccer commercial of Ronaldinho where he kicked the ball off the bar like 3 different times and chested it from below. There's one about Tiger Woods like bouncing it up and then hitting it. Or, there's stories about if you watch like Dude Perfect and their amazing trick shots, whether or not it's edited in there, right? And so if it's being passed off as it is meant to be real and you find out it's fake, that is problematic. If it is not presented that way, if you have the option to say, it's not real, but it's still entertaining, and I know that going in, and I've made the choice that, okay, it's not real, but I'm still entertained, it's still cool, then there's nothing wrong with that. There's an entertainment factor of it, right? Just because Ronaldinho didn't really kick the soccer ball against it, it's still a really cool commercial that I enjoy watching on it.
But would it make you buy something? Because no brand is just doing stuff for pure entertainment. They're doing this because eventually they want you to buy their product. So would it influence you? Let's go with your scenario. I know it's fake. I understand that this is a virtual persona that was created, and it's still amazing cinematography. It's amazing accomplishments, amazing feats, whatever it is. And this thing is being promoted, this product or service is being promoted. Does it influence you differently to buy it versus a real human?
again, I keep giving these caveated answers, but there's nuance to it, right? It depends on if the content was entertaining enough to get me in it, and therefore I got exposed to learning about the existence of this product or this brand, and now it's in my mind and I can consider it, it's effective. If the goal is to convince me that an expert, so again, because I'm soccer and not rock climbing for you, if the message of Ronaldinho's commercial was about a particular pair of shoes that was so good that it could give you creative control over the ball to do that, and then I find out it's fake, now I don't believe in the product as much. If the goal is just to get me to know about Nike and to think about Nike for the next time I buy it, it's probably effective because now I've been entertained and it's sitting in my mind. Again, it's all about how you use the vehicle of the message and what your intention is. If you need the endorsement and the belief in this product works as we're promising, as shown by this expert or this real thing, it's not going to work. If it's just, we need you to spend 10 seconds thinking about our brand and remembering it when you go to buy something, it can be effective. It's all different things on there and the way that you use it in the creative vehicle to it. So all of this comes into, inherently, I don't see anything wrong with using virtual creators if you use it to the intent and the effect, and you're not deceptive about it. The bigger question I would have is, I'll go back to your rock climbing example. Will you reach the same 10,000 consumers who might consider buying your product with the virtual content as you will with the real climber? If the answer is yes, then whatever's more cost effective and cheap and conveys your brand is perfectly easy. The theory here is that a different 10,000 consumers are probably spending their time and energy watching the real climber and believing in the message that that person's conveying than the AI creator, in which case it's on the marketer to decide, is it better for me to spend $1,000 reaching 10,000 of this type of consumer, or 50,000 getting endorsement and belief and reaching this consumer? Which one's going to deliver better ROI? And I'll take that one step further in, is your marketing dollar intended just to sell product, or is it meant to sell product, because everything's meant to sell eventually, and give you some kind of brand credibility, some virality, create a conversation, and do types of things? You got to think about your objectives and your outcomes in making all of these decisions.
Yeah. Oh, here's where I probably would differ with you then. In the scenario of, if I could spend $1,000 creating, let's say all the upfront costs have already been expensed and are being amortized for the technology and the software and all this kind of stuff. But let's say I could go and create, a virtual creator influencer for rock climbing or soccer on the cheap, and I could reach, and in this case, you argue different audiences. I'm going to argue, no, you're trying to reach the same audience. You're trying to reach enthusiasts of that, whoever's following Alex Honnold or any soccer player or whatever, you're trying to get them. You want the authentic enthusiast who's going to buy your product and be receptive to your message. So I'm going to assume it's the same 10,000 people. If you could reach them by a virtual influencer for $1,000 that you created, or you had to pay a top athlete in soccer or climbing $50,000 to reach that same 10,000 people, I'm going to go with the real human all day long, because I think the threat to sort of the human social componentry of it being a virtual, and in this case, I will go with, it's an assumed known virtual influencer. It's not faked or hidden, but it's known. The cultural distortion that I think comes away from that, related to humanity, and just sort of the threat of me personally feeling like I could buy into and be influenced by a robotic influencer that was created through AI as much as I could through an athlete or somebody that I genuinely like and have watched and seen do stuff, that I would really feel I have a big problem with that.
Man, you're treading down a very interesting road there, though, is because immediately what I think about is, I'm not sure who I'm asking this about. I think I'm going to ask it about the brand or the company. Maybe it's the marketer. Maybe it's all of us. What is the truest responsibility of a brand or a company? Is it to care about what you just talked about, the existential, all of that? Or is it to spend their dollars to maximize their sales and their profit.
Well, they're a publicly traded company. Then of course it is to do nothing more than make money for their shareholders, right? That's why Yvon Chouinard has vowed to never sell Patagonia, because he said, as soon as I do, then it's no longer about the brand, it's about the shareholders, and I'm not going to sell the soul of the company so that I can make money for shareholders. And that is the existential part of what we're talking about, which is, do virtual influencers cross that line? It does.
But I do think you are discounting the fact that, again, virtual influencers don't pop up and exist in a vacuum. It is, you're supporting a different human investment. Again, that virtual influencer, at least for now, is still a byproduct of a lot of human ingenuity and effort and training, and it's just different. So it's not the person climbing the face of the rock wall, but it is a programmer, a coder, or someone who is creating that, nurturing it, cultivating it, putting time and energy into it. Just as much human effort is going into creating a virtual creator that is believable and skillful enough to be useful, at least for now, as the person that's climbing the face of that rock wall. You're supporting a different human endeavor.
Yeah, maybe in some really, not super technical things where the person that created the virtual influencer would actually have had to have done themselves in order to be able to talk about or explain things, maybe in scenarios where that hasn't happened. So here's some arguments against it, besides what we're just talking about. High upfront technology costs. So you have to have the software to be able to create these things. And of course, a lot of the things we've talked about, lack of human emotion, again, sort of the more existential threat to human creators, the authenticity question, what sort of cultural distortion does it create? So further from that, or further along that line of thinking, what happens if, let's take fashion and beauty, for example. The people who are creating the virtual influencers, do they have a cultural or ethical responsibility to create models who are donning the fashion or the makeup or whatever in a certain way? Well, you're going to do that if you're a clothing company, right? If you're, I don't know, I'm going to say bad clothing, not bad names, but old school names, Levi's or, whatever. Do you have a cultural and ethical responsibility if you're going to create virtual? Think about this. We remember when we were going to get involved in that AI company to be able to create, would we have had a cultural and ethical responsibility to make sure our virtual models looked a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very slippery slope on that front. And we've seen variations of this play out, right? Are you creating unrealistic beauty standards or, things like that? I mean, we've seen that without the use of AI and models. We've seen that in the fashion industry, right? You have, certain beauty standards or body type standards or representation standards. So this is, again, it's a continued variation in our sort of evolution of humanity that kind of creates problems. Like they've gone in and done the proportion studies of a Barbie, and if it was a real human being, it's completely unrealistic. Yet little girls were exposed to that being a beauty standard for the longest time, right? So if you're creating virtual influencers that are creating beauty standards that literally aren't humanly realistic and you create skews, like, I would argue that that's a problem. But also, whose responsibility is it? Is it the brand's responsibility to not reflect it that way? Is it the consumer's responsibility to understand, like, a Barbie's not a real person and therefore I shouldn't expect it to be? Like, and it's a virtual side of that. I don't know. These aren't things that I have answers to, but they create interesting questions. And again, it's where does the responsibility lie? If I can create a beautiful, incredible, engaging ad that gets people to spend time and therefore they're exposed to my product and they go and buy it, have I done my job regardless of whether or not I've properly represented humans in a certain way or reflected in a certain way? I think a lot of this ends up being pretty self-policed, if you will, because I don't know, like I'm starting to think of all the cool things that Red Bull has done, right? Mm-hmm. Think about that space jump thing that was such a cultural fun. What if you found out that was fake all these years later? That would stink and be like, oh, that's terrible. But at the same time, you're like, but it was effective. It worked pretty damn well. So, is that problematic? I think the transparency of what is real and what isn't is a pretty critical linchpin in all of this. If it's relatively easy or clear that things aren't real and people still choose to be entertained and want to watch it, I think it's just an evolution of what's available to us. Like, again, like we've had so many technological evolutions that it's in there. I do think if you start to pretend and mask, hey, I'm pretending this is a real person, and you find out it's not, that's pretty hard to defend, I think.
Well, we know that's happening in more of like the politico, realms of news and things like that, right? Like fake news and all. We know that that's a possibility that's either already happening or is going to continue to happen. And that's a really scary space, right? What happens when a message comes out from a political person and it looks real? It's great propaganda.
I think that's going to have to be regulated, right? You already aren't allowed to make misleading claims in ads. There's regulation of that. Even with real influencers, they're supposed to disclose when they're being paid for things. Like, there are rules that are meant to protect consumers from.
There's no rules in war and geopolitical.
No. But I'm saying in advertising, I think there are. Whether or not people follow them, I think that'll naturally fall under a lot of the rules that are meant to protect consumers as is. Again, whether or not people follow them, skirt them, go around them, I don't know. But I think all of that'll, again, there will be some self-policing amongst all of this.
Okay, so to recap, in a fully transparent environment, you're arguing that it's not a shortcut. It's a conscious choice that can be done right in a transparent way. And that there are consumers out there that you would argue would probably still be in favor of that if it's all done right. And your argument is that's okay versus it's totally not okay. We should not be getting influenced by AI created influencers. We should only be responded to and akin to and liking real humans. And if that's the case, do real humans all of a sudden become this outlier luxury? Does like a real human influencer become like, worth 10 times more because now there's so many virtual ones in the marketplace?
I mean, it could shift in that, right? Again, I'm going to use one more example and then I'm going to go back to my closing and move on. How is it all that much different than when Butterfinger used Bart Simpson as an animated character as an endorsement, right? That's not a real person versus an actor, right? Like we've seen variations of this. It's not that big of a difference, right? It's Toy Story versus live action movie. There's animation, there's like there's video game characters, there's Mickey Mouse. Like, he's not a real person. He's a byproduct of things. Like, it's not that different in those variations. So again, ultimately, I think my takeaway on it is I think it's a creative medium that if you as a company have a great creative idea, can use it to deliver a story that hits. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's early and there's novelty to it. And so therefore it has the chance for much more breakthrough. I think if and when it were to become more ubiquitous, I think the novelty of it would wear off. It'd be harder to break through, and the pendulum could shift the other way, and the outlier could be going back to the human creator. I think everything is novelty, interest, nailing the timing, nailing the utilization. I just see it as one more available option for a good marketer and a good brand to explore. Can I use this to convey a message, to connect with an audience, and to create a behavioral reaction that is favorable for my brand?
Well, okay.
Or can it be a flop? Can I try it and can it fail miserably because I didn't have a good idea and creatively it stunk like a bad Super Bowl commercial?
Yeah, and look, I think there's just to sort of put my wrap up thoughts on it, I think there's definitely a generational component to this too, right? You're a millennial, I'm a Gen Xer, right? I might be just old enough to go, man, you know what? I just don't think I can get behind a virtual influencer and trying to influence me for whatever I'm interested in following, whether it's surfing or rock climbing or sailing or whatever I'm into, right? Like the idea of a virtual front being programmed by somebody in the background, I just don't think I can buy into that. But I think your generation and younger will not only buy into it, they will, in many cases, seek it out and try to, engage with it more. I think that's what's going to happen. I guess only time will tell, and maybe I'll be dead
I
by
would
that.
argue that if there's a brand out there where you are their customer and they try to reach you that way, then they've made a really bad creative and marketing decision.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I mean, look, again, I'm stereotyping myself as Gen X being in my 50s. I'm just old enough on the outside edge of all this stuff that I don't know that I personally could ever fall in love with a virtual influencer and like buy into what they're promoting.
You know what I bet you would work on you? And I'm just going to hypothesize. And you've seen this a little bit with like the holograms. Like if they brought back a singer or someone like a nostalgia thing from you and recreated like a dead celebrity or someone that you really loved and made it really cool, I bet you that would get your attention. I bet you would work. And that's not a real person. That's a recreation. And I bet you could be super effective on you.
Okay. Yes. But we're talking about it in different contexts. What I was framing this whole thing up around influencers, using the word influencers because they're paid to sell something. So yes, if somebody came back and put on a virtual concert with, I don't know, Elvis, or if somebody brought back John Candy in a movie, I'd probably go watch it. So they're selling me a movie and I'm paying for it because I want to see John Candy. So in that context, yeah, you're probably right. And maybe that's a good way to spin it. But I was thinking of it more in just the typical, I'm scrolling my feed and there's a influencer who's promoting whatever they're promoting that's in my feed because my feed knows what I like. And in full transparency, I know this is not a real human. Would I be as influenced by what that message is versus if the exact same script and message was delivered by a known personality in that field that I trust and like? Would it have the same impact or a different impact? I'm narrowing it down to that. And I think for me, a virtual influencer would have far less of an impact versus a real human in that context. But what
it depends on how good the content is, how entertaining it is. Like if it was a really well done piece of content that engaged you and you found interesting, it's still at the end of the day. What did we go back to when we were talking about? We were walking in London and had the conversation. Everything boils down to, can I grab a couple of seconds of someone's attention? Everything comes back down to that one way or another, more or less.
Yes, but for me in this particular context, I almost have an ethical problem with it. I'm too old for it. And like I said, I think younger generations will embrace it and it'll thrive and they won't care. I think probably anybody my age or older probably cares from just it's too radical of a thing to embrace. I'm too far gone down that pipeline of not being able to accept it. But boy, would I love to see John Candy come back in a movie, or Chris Farley, or anybody like that, or Michael Jackson do a virtual concert and it looks like him and it behaves like him and it looks as real as a real human. Yeah, I'd buy a ticket to that.
Complete and total tangent on that because you used the name, and I absolutely loved Chris Farley. I'm like, now I'm trying to think what is the first company that's going to go license and pay for the rights of Chris Farley and completely recreate him, and would that work or not? I bet you it would. Like that. I've not even thought about anything like that.
From what I have read, movie studios are already securing deals with the estates of celebrities and things like that because they will be able to recreate. They can go back and ingest their voices from everything they've done, right? We now have voice synthesis with AI. They can go back and ingest all their movies they've ever done, and AI can completely build that character based on their personality, their tone of voice, their emotions, everything, and recreate it. It will happen.
As a human, I would love to know if I watched a completely new movie with a virtual Chris Farley, if that's where I'm on your page of thinking, like, would it hit me the same as him really being on screen? Or is it literally just what I was seeing because it's coming through pixels on a screen anyway? It's not like I'm going to see a live play where I have to meet him. Would that hit the same for me? That is an experience I will be very interested to see if it makes any difference to me if and when that ever happens.
Well, that was sort of my point earlier. Do you differentiate between cells or pixels? Does that change anything? I don't know. We'll see. It's a good debate. And I know that it will happen probably in our lifetime. We'll watch a movie or something with virtual actors in it that aren't real. And I hope they bring back some really amazing, people that.
I wonder what that arc will be as well, right? Because there will be inevitably some degree of novelty to it, and that initially that it'll ride a wave to. But once that wears off and becomes the normal, that shift the attitude and the adoption of it differently. A lot of shifting sands in the horizon there.
I don't know, my friend. You've got 14 years more than I do to see it all unfold before your eyes because you're that much younger than me. So you get to enjoy more of it than I will ever get to enjoy.
Or not enjoy, depending on your point of view.
Or not. All right. We're going to wrap up. We've got some interesting guests coming up in the next couple of shows on the creative side and some more on the AI tech side with companies that we've invested in. And those will be fun to talk to. So I will catch you on the next show.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.